Hello, good afternoon, everybody. So, today we're going to discuss um, basically three types of art and how they can be used to improve students' critical thinking, but also how art can be used to allow students to find a space within their minds, to find themselves, to trust themselves, and to trust their own abilities more, their own abilities to create, to think critically, to analyze situations. These are some of the big questions we're going to look at. How can art bolster skills, but also critical thinking and self reflection? What properties does art hold that are conducive to critical thinking? And how does art produce joy and help imbue learners with passion and a sense of wonder? These are some of my few of my favorite artists um, who we might look at a few works today from, particularly Monet's great painting of the boat there with the sun setting. Um, this came about at a time when art was changing. It was moving away from just literal representation and figurative representation of the real world. People were starting to see the world in a slightly different way. And a lot of that had to do with changing technologies and a lot of the fun that was going on in cities like Paris and New York at the end in the 1870s through 90s. Um, but people were starting to think about things a little bit differently, and that's really what art can do. It can make you think outside the box a little bit. Um, so basically, this is just kind of what I was thinking about. Um, Art and those who consume art, both the artist and those who enjoy taking in art, are allowed a space in their mind. Um, and this is an important space to hang on to because we lose a lot of this nowadays in our go, go, go society. To walk languidly next to Monet's water lilies in the MoMA, to space out and listen to Purec's Angel, or listen intently to Raekwon's Only Built for Cuban Links, or to watch the slow panning shots of any Tarkovsky film, is to be immersed in the sacred space of contemplation. And that's really what we're after today. We're going to try to figure out how art can allow students a little bit more space within their own brains, a little bit more confidence to be okay inside thinking, inside thought. We're going to look at three mediums that I think can really help not only teach our students the skills they need, but also get them to enjoy thinking and enjoy intellectualism for its own sake, its own values. And art can really push us towards that because so much of it has to do with reverie and enjoying being in the moment. We're going to look at film, art, and music, and we're going to inspect some of Herrera's quotes from Jabberwocking and some of Maria Popova's writing, particularly her writings on music. So, film, our first medium, our first artistic medium. Here's some great films, some films that I really love. Let's take a look at film, see how it can help push our learners towards a more contemplative space. So the skill of showing and not telling, this is an important skill. As teachers, we usually do a narrative unit where we want students to use descriptive language. But showing and not telling is an important skill in life in general. It asks that your audience, your viewer, your reader, use their imagination. So we can give students synonyms and descriptive words, packets of better words, more detailed words, but we can also immerse them in the artistic medium where showing rather than telling is the main goal. And filmmakers do this quite well, as their goal is often to convey information through emotion and visuals rather than exposition. So let's look at the art of the scare. Many of my students love horror movies. Filmmakers' ability to scare us is a great way to showcase how the better scare, the better writing, is conveyed through showing rather than merely telling. Think of the overused and lazy jump scare as telling, and the slow build-up scare as showing. We see so many jump scares in movies and horror movies nowadays. We're going to look at a couple examples, but basically, it's a little bit boring. We're being told to be scared with a loud sound and a jarring cut all of a sudden. It's a little bit boring. Writing can be similarly dull without descriptive language or character building. It's like if I was just to write, I was angry. This is just telling. My reader, won't be too interested in that. It kind of treats them like a child, just telling them information. No one wants to be told things. They want to do the work themselves. And then we're going to look at three scenes that I think do a great job at scaring. They show, um, they allow the audience to use their imaginations to build up suspense in their minds before the actual scare happens. This is showing. Again, the key to showing is to allow your audience member, your viewer, your reader to use their own imaginations, their own curiosity, because with that, they will come up with some very interesting things in their minds naturally. So let's take a look at a few instances of telling. We're going to look at one example of telling, kind of a jump scare, and then we're going to look at three examples of better scares that are showing.
Here we go. Okay, so what do you think?
Wow, this whole place is ours?
I even got him to throw in a whole forest as a new backyard.
Like westbound slow to Valley Forge 24. All the Blue Ridge both directions, generally slow between number 3 and number 2. Route 1 and Media Swarthmore. Jersey has a half a mile slow down to 55.
Call. Call. Hey, your Cocoa Puffs are getting soggy. Let me see. Oh, honey, you got a spot. Head up.
Okay, so here's another example. Let's look at a clip from 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. Now again, let's focus on how this shows us something. As we watch this clip, think about it this way. Stanley Kubrick could have shown the great apes, and he could have just had a title card that says, "This is the dawn of man," millions of years ago. And then he could have switched to space, to humans in an advanced state, and he could have just said, okay, this is where we're at now. It's the year 2001. Things have changed. Humans are advanced now. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he shows us the transition of time with a great match cut, which is that famous cut from the bone being thrown up into the air and transforming into the spaceship. So let's take a look at this clip and see how he shows us rather than tells us. And Herrera does the same thing in his stories. The book is wonderfully illustrated with all kinds of pictures that move, that capture motion. They drop us right in the action. They harness anybody who's a kinetic learner, anybody who really loves visuals as well, will totally be able to get into his writing. He captures motion. He captures the frenetic nature of motion. And he also captures the the kind of oddities that our brains can come up with some of his drawings that accompany his stories and his poems. Only a dreamer, only a human dreamer would be able to come up with such odd things. And he's able to capture that strangeness well. And again, it allows the learner to understand that it's okay to explore these hidden spaces of our brains. It's okay to sit and stew in these spaces in our brain and to really get into contemplation and into a slow and relaxed form of thinking. Art. So, our second medium. Here's a few great pieces of art from throughout history. Michelangelo's La Pietà is particularly wonderful, I think. It depicts Mary and her son, but just look at the way that something as solid as stone, marble, has been turned into this soft fabric, this cloud-like um, essence. It's really incredible to think that humans can do that. Um, and this is what art allows for. Art allows us to really express ourselves in extremely wonderful, fantastical, detailed ways. It really shows the best of us. Art allows our young learners to discover the quiet and reflective spaces inside their minds. It slowly introduces students to the idea that sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's necessary to be alone in life, not merely from other people, but from busy thoughts and ingrained philosophies. The life of the artist can be lonely. Um, Many of us have probably heard several times, if we want to pursue an artistic medium, well, it's going to be tough. You might not make a lot of money. People are going to give you a hard time if you don't have a regular degree or regular job. But this, of course, needs to be brushed off because you have to follow what you're passionate about and what's in your heart. And I think we should be instilling that in our learners. This poem by Herrera really isolates this idea that sometimes you must go alone. He says, "It takes many walks alone, unnoticed, on a sidewalk you have never walked, or with friends that come and go. And they will come and go if you are pursuing your passion and your art uh, in a very focused way." So here's one way we can use art to teach a skill like tone. Tone being the author's or the artist's attitude towards a subject matter, towards a character, or towards some idea in their story. So instead of just giving students a definition of tone and telling them to use it in their writing, we can start with art. It's a great way to do it. Take these two pictures, two paintings. They're by the same artist and they're of the same guy, Napoleon. But the picture on the left, the tone is very different than the tone in the picture on the right. So we can start off by showing students these two paintings, and we can tell them to pick out details first. What do those details that we pick out tell them about the author's, in this case the painter's, attitude towards Napoleon? Well, they might notice some of the details first in the picture on the left. Number one, they might say, oh, he looks healthy. He's covered in clean clothing. His horse looks very muscular and proud. He's charging uphill and pointing upwards. So, the painter's attitude about Napoleon in that painting seems to be hopeful, self-assured, powerful, confident. Then you could have them look at the painting on the right. Very different. Even though it's the same painter and the same guy, Napoleon, very different tone. You can see he's clutching his stomach, maybe from a wound. His horse looks half dead. His men look like they're about to drop from exhaustion, too. His clothes are tattered. His horse's head is facing downwards. His head is facing downwards. So the artist's attitude towards Napoleon, his tone towards Napoleon in this painting is gloomy, defeated, depressed, disappointed. Looks like Napoleon just got beaten and is soon to be on his way to his first island visit. We can also look at how artists appropriate and adopt different styles of art to get a new message across. Wiley's wonderful painting, which hangs in the Brooklyn Museum, is a great example. So he's taking the painting by Louis David, which was painted about 200 years ago, and he is changing it. He's putting a new flair on it. This is a series when he would ask regular people in the streets to pose for him, and then he would transpose them onto famous paintings. And it allows us to ask questions. What's Wiley's message about culture, power, race, the nature of image making? You can get students into art and art making in this way. So they see that throughout time, artists oftentimes adopt the ideas, the artworks, and the messages from other artists. Nothing is in a vacuum. There's always room to create, and we should be taking from previous works in order to expand our thinking, in order to stew in our own minds, and to get into a state of contemplation. Same thing with Pablo Picasso's Guernica, which depicts the horrors of the Spanish Civil War when the Nazis were bombing a small town in Basque Country in Spain. Um, and again, when I show students this, it takes a while to get into it. It takes a while for them to look at it and see what's going on. It takes a while for them to feel the feelings that come along with this. You have to really look at it for a while. It's different from just looking at a photograph of bombed out Spain or bombed out London after a lot of the bombing of World War II. From that photo, they can tell, okay, well, this is of destruction, it's of war. But Pablo Picasso's painting really demands that we invest more time. Again, it demands that we go into a contemplative space and think a little bit more deeply. And eventually students began to see some of these things. They see the chaotic nature. They see some of the pain on the faces in these paintings. They see the destruction, the chaos, and the debauchery of war. But only through spending more time with it, through slowing down their thinking process and going into a contemplative zone, do they see what Picasso was trying to show. And I think Picasso shows it in a much better way than if we were just to look at a still image, a photograph of actual war scenes. Now let's take a look at our third medium, music. So here's a great quote by Piper. Music opens a path to the realm of silence. And again, how can music lead to silence? Isn't that a little oxymoronic? I don't think so. Remember, we're after the realm of contemplation and reflection through the art spirit, through the idea of art appreciation and the love of creation. Silence doesn't necessarily mean the absence of sound. It can be very full with our thoughts. Anyone who loves white noise will agree that silence is not always quiet. The hush of a fan, a chill hop station playing in the background of your class or home, the sounds of cooking or rain outside, these all constitute silence, in that they facilitate contemplation or deep relaxation. Music and its cousin silence allow us to zone out and think blissfully on nothing at all. Music is simply vibrations. It is the art form which interacts with physics and natural laws to bring us into a world of wonder, awe, and emotion. Here's another great quote by Piper. Music prompts the philosopher's continued interest because it is by nature so close to the fundamentals of human existence. Maria goes on to point out, Piper says, just as in poetry, we perceive more in something other than the factual, literal meanings of words. And again, this brings us back to Picasso's painting. It's not just a literal photograph, which students can say, oh, that's war. It asks us to look a little bit more deeply and look away from literal meaning and look more into symbolic meaning. Music does the same thing. It conjures up all types of emotions in us. She goes on and connects this to Aldous Huxley's assertion that after silence, that which comes nearest to expressing the inexpressible is music. And again, music puts us in this great state of mind. It can give us goosebumps. One of my students last semester was dealing with some verbal abuse at home. And her first description in her narrative of silence was one we might expect. Her neighborhood is quiet and it's boring. No one's around. There's not a lot going on. When her father started yelling more, there was no silence. The space was filled with sound. When the father was removed, there was silence, and it was good. But it was also deafening and surreal. She wasn't sure what to do with this newfound peace of mind. Her second description of silence was as if it were a new sensation altogether. Music is similarly powerful because it allows our mind to explore space itself. Space is filled with harmonic wavelengths of energy. These vibrating strings soothe but also demand we pay attention. They give goosebumps and they rock us to sleep. Silence and music interact and hold different powers at different times and elicit previously unknown emotions and ideas. So here's just a few examples. Some great songs that I love, some classical music, some pop music, some very chilled, relaxed music, um, some great music by one of my favorite jazz musicians, Ahmad Jamal, um, Air, the French band Air, their great song La Femme d'Argent, which is just an instrumental. Cassio by Jungle, which is an incredible song, incredible pop song, mixed with a wonderful dance routine. So it's a great melding of dance and music. Um, and if you want, you can listen to these and think about the spaces that they create for you, the mental spaces they create for you.